Okay, so first things first, a little bit about me. I'm kind of a busy gal. I've got a lot going on. Been in practice now for almost 20 years, which is hard to say out loud. 20 years is a long time. I've also got 2 teenagers, which out of the 2 is probably the harder job of each one. I also have been married for about 20 years, and I technically the owner of DWC, but I prefer the term caretaker because it really is a team effort, and I'm just here to make sure everything runs smooth. And lastly, though, most importantly, I love to learn. So doing this webinar provided me an opportunity to kind of build on my knowledge and be able to share with you guys what I've learned. And it is definitely something I commonly see in practice. So it's been really helpful for me to get kind of freshened up to provide some new and updated information to my patients. So why is sleep so important? I think we all can kind of assume that we know that sleep is kind of a big deal, but specifically drilling down on the different parts of us that benefit from sleep. So one of the most important organs that needs sleep is our brain. If we don't sleep, we have trouble with memory. We have trouble with recall of what we even did the day before, where our keys were, where did we park, those sorts of things start slipping when our brain is deprived of restful sleep. The other thing that's important is physical health. So how our body feels, how it functions is determined based on how well we're sleeping. One of the overlooked things that happens during sleep is something involving detoxing. Our brain literally detoxes or takes out the trash from all the energy produced through the day that creates waste, just like our digestive system. We have to eat, we make some stuff, it comes out, hopefully every day. The brain does the same thing when we're sleeping. So ensuring that that functions normally. Additionally, our immune system also requires sleep. So this is probably one of the newest things that I've kind of learned or possibly relearned, because there was a lot going on in medical school, is that our T cells, which are a part of our immune system that helps fight things like viruses and cancer, every day they wake up and they have to go to school to learn their job. When we have a short sleep cycle or poor quality of sleep, they don't get to go to school and learn their job. So they can't function as well as they could. So maybe let things slip through, like a little virus or, a cancer cell. Those sorts of things are super important to be able to have your immune system functioning. Mental health. So I love using the example of if you've ever wondered if your mental health is impacted, just talk to a teenager after a sleepover. Their mental health is definitely impacted. They're going to have mood swings, possibly anxiety, trouble with emotional regulations. And this is not exclusive to teens. This is big grown-ups too that have trouble with that. So for all of those around you, their mental health as well, we want to make sure that you're getting a good night's sleep. Metabolism and weight, which that's a huge thing right now, especially with GLPs being front and center of major medical advancement for obesity. But what we overlook is the value of sleep. Sleep often, when it's disrupted, doesn't allow your body to produce the feel full hormones, which makes you more likely to overeat. It also increases your risk of type 2 diabetes. So sometimes before you start fancy stuff, we got to just make sure that when we're sleeping. And then lastly, the number one cause of death in the US is cardiovascular disease. That's what's going to get us all if we're not careful. So when you don't sleep well, you can have things like high blood pressure that puts you at risk for heart attacks or strokes, and you just don't live as long. So obviously sleep's a big deal. Now we know exactly why in those multiple different areas. But a lot of times it's not that easy to sleep. I came up with this little cartoon because it is so common. I hear, I'm tired when I hit the pillow, but then I can't fall asleep. So a lot of times it's a physical fatigue, but mentally your brain has other plans. Like last night, I will say my brain was doing a little bit of that, prepping for this talk. So this slide, I wanted to bring in the concept that sleep is a 24-hour process. So a lot of people will come in and say, I have trouble sleeping. And we specifically want to focus on the evening time. However, we got to look at from the time you wake up till the time that you do want to go to bed. That's really where healthy sleep resides. So I've got to look up how to say this word because I always forget. So this word over here in the left corner is called Zeitgeber, and it is a German word that literally means keeper of time. There are things in our environment that naturally help us with our circadian rhythm that have been here as long as us. The biggest star of the show literally is the sun. The sun produces full spectrum light, and that goes in through our eyes, our optic nerve, into our brain's clock. There's lots of medical terms, but I'm going to skip all that boring stuff. So inside there's a little clock that tells us, okay, it's daytime now because I've seen light, and that sort of sets the tone for the day. Additionally, what we do in the day affects what's called our peripheral clocks, or our clocks that are in other parts of us. So, for example, our heart has cells that are timekeepers, our liver, even our gonads. So we've got our ovaries, testes, and adrenal gland there down in the bottom. And they're all being told what's going on based on the activity or what we're doing around them. So, for example, exercise earlier in the day tells our body it's daytime. It gets our heart pumping, our blood moving, and that's what we want earlier in the day. Versus if we wake up, are sedentary, and then work out late at night, that might be telling our cells something completely different, some misinformation. Same thing with food. When we eat, tells our body, our liver cells, our intestinal cells that it's daytime. So things like eating later may not be that great when we're talking about sleep. And then last is what's going on in our mind. So if we're running around crazy all day versus sort of in a relaxed state, or worse, right before bed, getting some stimuli that's not very calming, our tissue cells may say, nope, it's not nighttime, it's daytime, and try to keep us up at night. So thinking about sleep, really driving this home that it is an entire day that leads to that evening and what's going to happen that night. So this would be perfect case scenario is all these things are happening based on our clock, our schedules never get messed up, and we're very structured. However, this is somewhat of what I see often is the disruptors that get in the way. We have something I think that's possibly stronger than the sun that impacts our brain, and that's our tiny little smartphones. Those smartphones, iPads, computers, screens, they're very disruptive, partly because they are producing different rays of light that include blue light, and blue light it's good for us at the right time, earlier in the day. But when we're watching cute little TikToks or, God forbid, reading the news or doom scrolling before bed, that's telling our brain it is not time for sleep. So it's going to mess up that little clock that's inside there. Another thing is being sedentary. So if we don't move, again, our clocks are going to get thrown off. If we eat foods that are very high in saturated fats, our liver gets dysregulated or isn't happy and needs help, and it starts behaving differently, sending out different hormonal cues, again, disrupting our sleep. And then, of course, probably the biggest culprit is our stress level. So that's probably the number one thing that I see in clinical practice is stress impacting it. Other things as well, but but stress is, I always say that our brains can't go to sleep when it thinks it's running away from a bear. That's how we're wired. So we have to prep ourselves through the day by managing our thoughts and feelings in order to get that good night's sleep. So we've been talking a lot about a good night's sleep, but what exactly is a good night's sleep? There's so many different iterations of what a good night's sleep is. So I'm going to give you somewhat of the generals on what a good night's sleep is kind of defined as. So first, starting with time. Most practitioners, experts in the field, agree that between 6 and 8 hours is a good amount of sleep. Now, this is very individualized. So if you sleep 5.5, that might be perfect for you. Or if you sleep 8.5, that might be perfect for you. Under 4, definitely not a great amount of time for most people. And then anything over 10, 11, or 12 hours a day is also not a good sign. So there are some indications that sleeping too much either causes disease or other diseases cause the requirement for that much sleep. So it might require some investigation. The other thing I want to normalize is awakenings. It is normal to wake up anywhere from 4 to 6 times per night. That is completely normal. So when we're saying, oh, I wake up multiple times during the night, that doesn't necessarily mean you're not getting a good night's sleep. There's more to it, but waking up is perfectly normal. So looking at this chart here, this is a diagram of somebody who did a sleep study. So these are measurements of different times of the evening where we go into different phases of sleep. So the first part is sleep latency, and that's where we're awake, that little turquoise part at the top. And that's also very normal. It should take between 10 to 20 minutes to fall asleep. I can't tell you how many times people have said, oh, I fall asleep within 2 minutes. I don't even remember falling asleep. That's not a good sign either. That often means that you're literally exhausted and you have to fall asleep. Too short is can indicate daytime exhaustion. Prolonged, meaning longer than 20 minutes, can be multiple different things, but a lot of times it's an overstimulation from something. So once we achieve that transition from being awake to asleep, our body then goes into phase 1 sleeping, which is that kind of that light dozing off, like gentle entry into sleep. It's very relaxing. Your body temperature starts to drop and you start making alpha waves, which is measured here over on the right. And those alpha waves are super important, but they also lead into we lead into the next phase thereafter, which is phase 2 or light sleep. So most of us have heard of REM or rapid eye movement sleep, and that definitely gets a lot of attention for, how much REM sleep did you get, those sorts of things. But light sleep, I wanted to draw some attention to because it's when our body does the most detoxing, or our brain does the most detoxing. So that's important for cleaning out the junk from the day. We don't want to skip trash day. So that light sleep day or light sleep cycle is super important. It's where we convert short-term memory into long-term memory. And there's these little things called sleep spindles, which is over here on the right. That's little small bursts of activity within the brain or theta waves that are super cool and super important for all of those things, cognition. Then we jump into phase 3, which is deep sleep. So deep sleep, as it's implied, it is our deepest state of sleep. It's when we produce delta waves. Everything slows down, our heart rate, our body is going through physical restoration during deep sleep. So a lot of us don't get enough deep sleep. The other section that a lot of times suffers is REM sleep, which is phase 4. And REM sleep is, I call it therapy for the emotions. This is where we process the day, good or bad. This is where we work it out while we sleep. It's also important for memory and learning. And interestingly enough, it's very, very active. So we're out through the whole thing, but it's very active, so much that we burn more calories during REM sleep. So again, if we're looking at reasons why we retain weight or difficulty maintaining, we could even look at REM sleep as a potential culprit, not getting enough, where it's creating some caloric reserves. All right, I think that was all I wanted to say about that. So I just think this is so cool that our brain does all of this cool stuff and all these different times of sleep and different sleep cycles. So this is something that continues through the night, and usually 3 to 4 cycles of stage 1, 2, 3, 4, all through the night. So this is a good example of somebody who sleeps really, really well. Can't talk about sleep without talking about wearables. I'm sure it's a conversation at many workplaces, definitely ours, about what was your sleep score last night? What was your readiness score? Everyone is talking about what their devices are telling them. So I wanted to make sure to speak a little bit about this, that health wearables are good and bad potentially. So I look at them as pre-screening only. They are definitely not a substitution for an actual sleep study. They are limited on what they can measure and how well they measure it. So for example, on these sleep charts here, the first one A was taken with within a sleep center and then compared with an Oura ring, a Galaxy, and then at the bottom was an Apple Watch. So each one of them did decent at different sections of it. Overall, it seems like the Oura ring probably closely matches the traditional sleep study. All I kind of wanted to point out with this was that it's just pre-screening. It doesn't necessarily mean something's going on or that something is even good. So a lot of times this is helpful, but not the end all be all. The other thing that I see it causing at times is this term orthosomnia. So if you want to really wow your friends at the next party, you can talk about orthosomnia and how it's rapidly growing. But this is a condition, just like anything, where if we focus too much attention on it, there can create some anxiety. So every night or every morning waking up, checking that sleep score, what did I sleep? Oh my gosh, I only got 50 minutes of deep sleep. Now I'm going to be wrecked for the whole day. It can really spiral out of control and create some mismatch between how you actually feel and what the data says. So if you find yourself in that trap, one of the things I recommend is just taking a break. So take it off for a few days, do a reset, and try not to read too much into that information. The other thing that I see happening too is self-treating. So I clearly have, based on my $400 device, clearly have a sleep disorder. So I'm going to start taking something to sleep, when that could be a very slippery slope and treating the wrong thing. So definitely something where this provides some insight. I'm always welcoming that information, but I always confirm with more advanced testing. So we'll go through what can get in the way of a good night's sleep. Probably, again, one of the biggest ones is stress. But how does stress necessarily impact us? We produce adrenaline. And if you've ever had an adrenaline dump, that's not going to cue sleep. That's going to be run away, get away, fight, flight, freeze, those types of reactions, not let's go to sleep. So stress definitely gets in the way from producing adrenaline, and that causes interruption in sleep. So a lot of times, if the stress is acute, like it's happening in the moment, difficulty falling asleep. But if it's more this chronic, ongoing daily type of stress, what you'll see more is interrupted sleep, where I don't sleep, I'm restless through the night, I don't really get those full sleep cycles. The next thing, which is a big part of my practice, is hormone imbalance. Nothing shines a light on sleep and hormones than perimenopause. So if you've ever been around somebody going through that, that's a time of life where the hormones definitely start impacting the sleep. Anything from hot flashes, night sweats, even just to more awakenings without even feeling the temperature shifts. The other hormone that kind of gets in there is testosterone. So when you have low testosterone, you're going to have more fragmented or broken up sleep. Vice versa, when you don't sleep good, your own testosterone production goes down. So a lot of this is almost like a little hamster wheel. So you got to get off. And then progesterone deficiencies, or when you have enough progesterone, it increases your deep sleep quality. So when I'm looking at somebody's sleep study, this helps me direct attention towards some of the hormones that may be in question based on even what their sleep study provides us. Obesity, it is definitely epidemic levels here in this country. I think it's something like 40% of Americans are struggling with obesity. And it's not just due to sleep apnea. A lot of times we think about sleep apnea because of the weight that's on the chest. However, it also can cause just poor efficiency, of sleeping. It's also very inflammatory, so things hurt more. All of that can affect the sleep. And some other simple things like not drinking enough water, caffeine for sure. One thing that I wanted to talk about under the caffeine is I have a lot of people that come in and they say, I can drink coffee and go right to bed. And I don't get it. I'm not that way. But that does not mean that it doesn't impair your sleep. What it doesn't impair is your sleep latency. So if anything, or that ability to fall asleep. So if somebody says, I can fall asleep easy drinking coffee, that's a big red flag for me that they probably do have something going on with sleep, that they can sleep through caffeine. Even if that's not the case, it does decrease your sleeping efficiency and reduces your overall sleeping time. So we want to avoid that or limit that during the day. And then lastly, decongestants, like Sudafed or the prescriptions or the over-the-counters that you have to get from the pharmacist, as well as stimulants that are often prescribed for ADHD. Beyond that, there are sleeping disorders that can affect the quality of your sleep. So I wanted to highlight some of them. There are so many sleep disorders. So to think that we can diagnose anything off of an Apple Watch reading is it's false. One of them being obstructive sleep apnea, which is where we lose oxygen through the night due to the airway collapsing or not being stimulated enough to stay open. So 20% of adults have this, more common over 50, but it's super common and underdiagnosed. PLM, which stands for periodic limb movement, the most common one is restless leg syndrome. That's defined as more than 15 movements per hour that do affect quality of sleep. So it's not the little, twitch or shifts or things like that. It is significantly impacting that quality of sleep. Narcolepsy, that affects our circadian rhythm, and then as well as epilepsy, ADHD, other conditions that indirectly impact sleep. For instance, gastro or GERD, basically, or reflux disorder greatly impacts sleep, and many adults suffer from GERD. So before we start looking even into sleep, we're looking at what are maybe the things that are getting in the way. This next slide, I think, is really cool. It's a great mnemonic for screening for sleep apnea. So it's stop, bang. And the questions are really straightforward. Do you snore? Do you feel tired during the day? Have you been observed gasping for air? Do you have high blood pressure? Do you have a BMI that's categorized as obese? Are you over 50? Is your neck size greater than 16 for females or 17 for males? And then lastly, gender, are you male? So that one's pretty straightforward. The rest of them, you want to kind of really dive in and really investigate. But having 3 or more for me you're already getting a sleep study. Now, some of it could be explained, if you're tired during the day, you're over 50 and you're male, that may not put me right to a sleep study. But certainly if there's other signs, then definitely that would be important to screen for. All right, so after we've done a screening, I'll actually run some tests. So dependent on the story, the person's individual issues, I'll run some basic blood work, checking blood cells, their liver and kidney function, inflammation markers, iron levels are also important. And then looking at thyroid and then sex hormones. And then underneath that, there's EPO, which is erythropoietin. And that gets elevated when you have sleep apnea. Your body doesn't have enough oxygen, so it's trying to drive the increased red blood cells. So we might see something like higher hemoglobin, hematocrit, and red blood cells has nothing to do with blood. It has everything to do with oxygen. And having that EPO definitely can kind of get us clued in on that there may be apnea going on. Additionally, obviously, sleep study, if it's indicated, I will often look at adrenal function, looking at cortisol rhythms, gut function, gut and brain is a thing. And then beyond that, neurotransmitters, which is all the brain chemicals that engage good sleep. So instead of looking at as you have the problem, or a flower that's not blooming, instead of blaming the flower or looking at the flower, I'm going to look at the environment that the flower is put in. And how can we shift that environment and shift the physiology of the person in order to engage good sleep? All right, this is my big disclaimer, and this is very important to me. This is like a medical legal little sign thing, but what I want to make sure that I highlight is the benefit of working with a naturopathic doctor is we do treat you individually. I'm going to go through some of the things that I use commonly, but you deserve somebody working with you, listening to your story, and finding the right solution for you. I want to make it really clear that sleep disorders cannot be mitigated with sleep tips, supplements, and certain things. So it is something to seek medical attention from your healthcare provider, preferably a good ND, because we're just great. All right, we'll jump in. So the first place we start is with a sleep plan. So again, thinking about that 24-hour clock, sunlight helps our brain recognize the start of the day. So getting that full spectrum sunlight, if you live in a cloudy or if it's winter time and that sort of thing, they do make full spectrum lights that you can use to substitute that. But the idea is that you get 15 to 20 minutes of that daylight sun in the morning. The other cool part is you can do the same thing in the evening and also have that light help you go to bed by looking at the sunset. So this picture I was at Hole in the Rock overlooking at South Mountain, I think. So a beautiful Phoenix sunset, very classic. They happen pretty much every day, pretty sure. So make sure to get out there and take a peek of that. That red kind of warm, dusky light is another clue, like, hey, it's getting to be evening time. So we're going to start winding down. So sunrise and sunset therapy. Making sure that you hydrate. So hydration is basically clear or pale yellow urine with no odor. That's kind of the clue that you've drank enough water. That definitely is an issue that we have here in the desert, but making sure you check kind of the color of your urine to make sure that you're drinking enough water. If not, try to catch up earlier in the day. You don't want to guzzle a bunch of water right before bed because your bladder will definitely interrupt you. And then movement. So I didn't put exercise, but walking, this could be weight training, this could be yoga, however you do it. It's 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week that helps with increasing deep and slow wave sleep. So not only do you get to sleep better, but that movement helps your body produce serotonin, and then serotonin turns into something that rhymes with it called melatonin that we'll talk about in a minute. So that's our daytime plan. Then at night, we've got a few things that are non-negotiable. You have to have a comfy bed, a cool and dark room. So 100% dark, like blackout curtains, no lights, no light coming from your phone or anything like that, no disruptions. And then cool, the ideal sleeping temperature is 68 degrees, which during the summer is very expensive here in Arizona. But that is where we're at. So you want to make sure that your body temperature, same thing, that cool air, that coolness is another one of those Zeitgebers that will help you know that it's time for sleep. There's other things like using white noise or pink noise, all the different types of noise, apps that help you relax before bed, even switching to a red light bulb instead of a regular one in order to not activate our brain saying it's daytime. So I put 2 highlighted things on here. Don't sleep past you when you need your brain. So this speaks to the waking up regularly, also helps with creating that restful sleep. So even if you can sleep on the weekends, you want to wake up when you need your brain. So if you normally work at 8 a.m., then you don't want to sleep past 8 a.m. So you can sleep right up to 8, but you want to get up. That's going to queue up for your brain to make sure that it stays on track. The most important factor out of all of it, even over how long you sleep, is sleep schedule consistency. And that basically means I get up at the same time, I go to bed at the same time, which is super boring. There's nothing fun or exciting or any money to be made off of that recommendation, but it is probably the most important one. So keeping that schedule. So this is popping up on the TikTok, the Gram, all of these places. So I wanted to bring this up because I do like this little mnemonic, the 10, 3, 2, 1, 0 sleep rules. So we talked about caffeine and how it interrupts, but cutting it off 10 hours prior to bed is the timing. So if you normally go to bed at 10, I'm not going to do the math, but count backwards 10 hours, and that's when you need to cut off caffeine. Even if you're one of those that I can drink it right before bed, you still likely have shortened sleep or disrupted sleep due to that caffeine intake. Avoid eating 3 hours before bed, and that's because we should be resting, not digesting. And 3 hours just ensures that food has moved all the way down. We don't have to worry about it interrupting. The 2 stands for stop working 2 hours before bed. I'm going to say working and working out. Again, working out in the morning is ideal, but sometimes we work early. We got to do it after work and hit the gym or favorite yoga classes until the afternoon. That's fine. Just it has to be at least 2 hours before bed. And then number 1, this is a very, very important rule, is no electronics an hour before bed. Not only is it the blue light, but it's the upsetting nature that is on a lot of our electronics, either reading the news or seeing something bad news. All that can wait till tomorrow. So make sure that you avoid that. One trick that I've done for myself that I like to share is putting app limitations on. So in your phones, it's under app settings. If you have kids, you've already done this for them. Do it for yourself too. Where you cut off certain apps at certain times of day in order to just make sure that we're not having any temptations to keep doom scrolling before bed. And then lastly, if you do all that, then you won't hit the snooze button at all. So getting out of bed right away, kind of jump starting out of bed is one of the other tips for making sure you sleep great. So foundation of nutrition is another way we can tackle this. So these are all things that can either help or inhibit sleep. So we talked about the water, making sure we get enough of that. Nutritionally wise, Mediterranean diet really isn't going anywhere. It's, again, super boring at this point, no money to be made off of it, but it is foundationally one of the best diets, not only for sleep, cardiovascular, brain health, heart health, all of that. So it's really just the one that we'll keep falling back on. So that typically includes plenty of fruits and vegetables, lean meats, as well as good fats like from olive oil and nuts and seeds. I put in there include kiwi fruit and tart cherries. That's because those fruits have melatonin in them. So if you're trouble sleeping, sometimes just adding a little bit of that natural melatonin can be helpful. Limiting caffeine. So I put this chart of caffeine comparisons just to give you a visual. I know when Red Bull came out, I was like, oh my gosh, that is so much caffeine in one drink. Nowadays, it's barely as much as some of the other ones. So a 12-ounce can of Red Bull has a little bit over 100 milligrams of caffeine in it. Celsius, Alani's, these are quite popular. Those have 200 milligrams each. And there's definitely some that are higher, and doing like a venti iced green tea or iced coffee from Starbucks is about 200 milligrams, which is your daily limit. So a lot of people will say I do my 1 to 2 cups of coffee in the morning, and then in the afternoon I'll hit the Celsius because I gotta keep going through the day. That is way too much. So limiting your caffeine to under 200 is the ideal. And then lastly, I'm here to ruin all of your happy hours and fun by saying the correct amount for sleep for alcohol is 0. Alcohol just isn't good for us at all. So I don't think I need to spend too much time on it. But it definitely impairs and it's not just quantity. Even one drink, people have about 10% worse sleep. So 10% ongoing terrible sleep with just one drink per night. And the results kind of increase as drinks go up as well. It makes it easier for some people to fall asleep because they do get into that deep sleep quicker, glass of wine to relax and I fall right asleep, but then you get a rebound effect and then you end up with more awakenings through the night, which definitely doesn't feel good the next day. So 0 is the amount. All right, dietary supplements. There are so many. I put this list to kind of represent the different things that I use in practice based on, again, the individual person that's sitting in front of me. So this is kind of where I want to remind you guys that not all of these are the right thing for you, and some of them could potentially cause aggravations. So I wanted to highlight some of my favorites and how I use them. The first one being melatonin. This hormone or nutrient, however you want to call it, is key in setting up that sleep-wake cycle. We know that it's often in sleep aids. You can pretty much pick up melatonin at every gas station now at this point. So a lot of people think of melatonin for sleep. It's actually not one of the ones that I use the most often, but it is something that's helpful in certain cases, especially for people over 50. The production of melatonin goes down. So sometimes it's about replacing what's missing, more so than even treating a disorder. Melatonin's often thought of as a sleep aid, but it also helps with oxidation, which is like our cells getting damaged. So it does way more cool things than just helps us sleep. The bummer is some people get vivid dreams, and those dreams can not be great sometimes. So nightmares can increase. The other is you can have a melatonin hangover the next day, which can take several hours to wake up. So I usually try to avoid that one unless it's really indicated. The one I probably start with most often is magnesium, and that's because about half of us are deficient in magnesium. So it's a really easy thing for me to say I have a 50% chance of improving things just by starting magnesium. Magnesium glycinate, I wanted to bring that up because that is heavily marketed for people who want to relax and have a great night's sleep. Who wouldn't want that? Unfortunately, in most of the formulations, it has about 100 milligrams of magnesium glycinate per capsule. Just magnesium alone, we need 200 milligrams of just that. And for glycinate, for it to help with sleep, we need at least 3,000 milligrams. So most of the capsules that are out there, you'll be taking anywhere from 10 to 20 capsules to get the effective dose. So I typically prescribe magnesium as either a tablet or a powder, and then glycine definitely as a powder. I don't combine them. It's way too many capsules. So nice try, all the supplement companies, but it's just not therapeutic. The next one that I use most often is theanine. And that's because when we talked about the disruptors, the biggest one is stress. So when we have a lot of stress through the day, the theanine can help balance that to where we're relieving the reason why somebody doesn't sleep, which is always what we're looking for, is helping supporting the root cause. All right. The other ones, I wanted to highlight this apigenin because it's kind of cool. It's up and coming, if you will. It's an extract usually from chamomile. So we know chamomile tea before bed, that sort of thing. But apigenin, it's a molecule that's inside there, and it sits on some of the same receptors that our sleep aids, our prescriptive sleep aids do. And so if somebody's trying to get off of a sleep aid, I'll often use that and in tandem to help reduce their reliance on, say, like an Ambien or something. The others, let's see, there's so many, but for instance, B12, B6, folate, kind of boring, but they're super important for producing melatonin. So sometimes I don't start melatonin. I say, let's give you some Bs and see if you can make it on your own. Same thing with the NAD. NAD does improve sleep quality, and that's because it gives the brain the energy it needs in order to function to engage sleep. All right. So I'm going to go through some of the medications just because this is a full spectrum talk. I'm not anti-medication, so I don't want to say that there's anything wrong with them or bad about using them. I just want to educate on the things that we want to look out for. So the first things first, before anyone starts medication, this is with me, this is with a general practitioner, your everyday GP, MD type person. The first line of therapy for insomnia is not medication. It is not sleep training either. That's one of the tools we'll use, but it actually is cognitive behavioral therapy, which CBT, that's shorts for CBT, works on the thoughts that lead to our behaviors. So it is under the umbrella of therapy, like something that you go and see a counselor for. It works surprisingly well. I wanted to highlight that on this chart over here on the right, where you see the symptoms of sleep being higher in the pink, which is placebo. And then the very lowest line, we've got CBT, which is the cognitive behavioral therapy. So even after 3 months, 12 months, 24-month follow-up, they followed patients that either used medications plus CBT, or CBT alone. And guess what worked the best, even over medications, was the CBT alone. So I bring that up because a lot of us are quick to go, what's the pill that I can take to sleep better? Or what's the herb that I can take to sleep better? When oftentimes it's not that simple. We want relief now, and I get that, and I want to help that, but we sometimes need to work it out with a therapist in order to get good sleep. When we've done all of those things, or in tandem with working with a therapist, that's when these medications really shine. So things like tricyclic antidepressants, one's called doxepin. That one's used for patients when they have trouble staying asleep. So that's more for wakefulness through the night. Trazodone, that's another one that I see commonly prescribed along with gabapentin. Both of those come with some side effects. So trazodone specifically can have some low blood pressure or just daytime fatigue. So you can feel kind of dizzy and tired. The gabapentin, it can create that and then some, including weight gain. So it's something where we really want to look at what can we do that doesn't have side effects, or can we do something in tandem while we're using this to sleep, but we're working on other plans to get out of this situation. Over the counters, I wanted to highlight as well, because you guys can walk out right now and go buy these, which is great for convenience, but terrible when you let years of these types of medications somewhat rob you of your health. So one that's commonly used is Benadryl, which is one of the ingredients that they'll put in things like Tylenol PM. So the PM part is usually an antihistamine Benadryl. Short term, no problem. Long term, using it night after night, we stop remembering things. We start seeing more issues with dementia, especially as we age. So using those for occasional sleeplessness, or setting the clock because you're traveling, totally fine, but not as a daily. So I think I highlighted definitely not on its own, but carefully placed can be helpful for sleep. I also want to talk a little bit about this plant, cannabis. And Arizona, we're legal for medicinal and recreational. So I have a lot of people that will use cannabis to sleep, whether that be a gummy, a vape, or any way that you get it ingested in your system. So initially, we were all excited because we did see some favorable results with sleep with using cannabis full spectrum. So that's the kind that you have to go to the special store to get, versus things like CBD that you can purchase without going into a dispensary. So CBD alone does help with REM sleep. It helps relax you so you're less stressed, so it can engage good sleep. Full spectrum, which includes the THC, can be very helpful for insomnia with chronic pain. But what we see is after a while, we see higher tolerance, so you need to take more, and the overall benefit starts to wane after a period of time. So a lot of times I just say it's great for, say, social things or having fun, but I wouldn't necessarily put it in the sleep aid category. And then lastly, on like anything that has to do with this, a product of the 60s or anything, weed or psychedelics, those sorts of things. Psychedelics are up and coming for a lot of conditions, including insomnia. So specifically psilocybin, which is from mushrooms, and then ketamine, which is a prescription pharmaceutical one. Those are showing some pretty positive research right now, outcomes with insomnia. So definitely we've got lots of options, some that are accessible now and some that might be coming in the future, which is kind of cool. All right, so sleep tech. This is where if you type in help with insomnia, you're going to get pop-ups on Facebook, on your Google, on your Gmail, everywhere about all these amazing devices that have come out that will help you sleep. So I did a little word cloud just with some of the brands and items that are available, but it is a $70 billion worldwide industry that is loosely regulated. So anything from wearables to even the devices that are marketed to help with sleep go through a process often called or often cleared for level 1 with the FDA. So they'll say FDA cleared, which that sounds warm and fuzzy, but level 1 FDA clearance is the same that's on your toothbrush or your Band-Aid that you use. What we can say is that it's safe. We can't say that it's super effective in treating or doing anything, but we just assume that it's safe because it has that little warm and fuzzy label on there. So a lot of them are level 1 cleared. What you want to look for is something that maybe has gone through what's called the 501(k) process, which has to go through the FDA. It's a little bit of a process, but basically what they've done is they have to show that it actually is working and it is safe and effective. So safe is great, but I would rather have something that's safe and effective. Again, the FDA is not the end all be all, but there is some level of credibility that happens when they go through that process. One bit of tech that I wanted to highlight here was cranial electrical stimulation, or CES for short. These are devices that are currently being used and have gone through that process of 501(k) approval that alter the electrical and chemical activity within the brain that works for anxiety, depression, insomnia, and then some devices that they add a pain module on for. So one of the companies, I don't have any financial interest in any of these, but the Alpha Stim is one brand that currently they're using in veterans for all the stress and things that happen from their exposure that often impact sleep or pain. And we're seeing some really, really cool results. So there are some things that are out there that are worth it. But before you go and spend, $1,000 on any sleep tech, whether it be a bed jet or a fancy alarm or some, calming device, we want to go through and go back to those basics, making sure that you're getting the sunlight, making sure we're turning off our tech, all of those things. It doesn't matter if you add in on top of that, a fancy bed or a ring that tells you how good you sleep. If you're not doing those foundational things, it's not going to work. So again, it's not super fun and exciting, but it works. I wanted to give you guys a few resources here. One group that I want you guys to follow is called Project Sleep. It is a nonprofit company, so they don't make money off of anything. They're just there as a resource to help people that are struggling. They have a sleep helpline, which I think is really cool. They provide some really good information on their website about insomnia, kind of myth busting and some steps. The next one is Sleepio, which is a free 6-week program online that's designed to help with sleep. So if you're just wanting to get on a program, something that has accountability and some lessons, that's another good one. And then just like we talked about the CBT and how effective that is for sleep, even more effective than sleep medications, reminding you guys of that, there's a site called Dr. Lullaby, which is therapy specifically for insomnia or sleep disorders. So that's available for you too. And that is it, my friends. We could probably go on and talk for hours about sleep, but I'm going to pop into the chat and see what kind of questions we have. But if you do have any questions about any of the things that I talked about today, go ahead and pop them in there in the chat. Okay. Oh, hi, Andrea. Thank you. All right, Alejandra, I see the question about, is it okay to take melatonin supplements regularly? So this is still debated, and I don't know why, but yes, it is safe to take melatonin supplements regularly. I'm not going to say if it's the right thing for your friend or the right process for it, but is it safe? Absolutely. It also does not suppress your own body's production of melatonin when you take melatonin. So that I've seen floating around. If you take melatonin, then you won't make your own. That is not true. All right, any other great questions? All right. Well, here's how you can get a hold of us. We're at Desert Wellness Center on Instagram. We're on YouTube. So this will be live on YouTube in the next week or so, as well as our website. So make sure to reach out. But thank you so much for all of your time and attention today.